Hey y'all, I'm going to do a fairly in-depth Roadhog mechanics guide here. There are a few other videos on YouTube like this, but I personally don't think they're satisfactory. They're either out of date or they don't really get very in-depth of exactly how you should be pulling off these mechanics. So I'm here to rectify that. So first and foremost, Roadhog's primary shotgun. You can see it has 4 central projectiles that, in my opinion, stay fairly grouped tightly until about 25-ish, 30 meters when they start to diverge pretty significantly. And then it also has a lot of, I guess, shrapnel on the side. It's a rough estimate of the spread here on the wall. Ideally, you want to be very close. You can actually one-shot pretty much a ton of the cast just by his insane damage, right, in a quick melee. It does 160 should all your pellets connect. And then of course it also has a 1.5 damage bonus on headshots. Brings it to 240 I believe, obviously ignoring armor. So you can actually one-shot a ton of characters should all your pellets land in the head. Ideally you want to be taking most fights between like 5 to 10 meters or closer, obviously, if possible. Beyond that distance, you really don't do a whole lot of damage just against like any sort of actually mobile targets. Like you can spam shields kind of. Like the spread's just too wide and the center shots are too inconsistent. So you really want to be aware of that. Okay, Roadhog's secondary fire, take a breather, is I believe 2.5 seconds of healing and 40% damage reduction. I believe you heal 400 total health. Ideally, this is kind of like Roadhog's shield now, or defense matrix, like his comparable ability to that. You really do not want to use it just to heal a bit of damage. You want to use it either to protect yourself from eating giant bursts of damage, or a ton of sustained fire, or if you think you're gonna otherwise die, right? For example, like if there's a Junkrat tire, a pulse bomb that you get stuck with, or a Diva bomb, or like a Widow's headshotting you and you need to go through an area, it's very useful just to hold down breather and reduce that damage by 40%, or sorry, by 40%. And that takes a lot of pressure off your supports and allows you to take more aggressive positioning. I see a lot of people just use it, I say this specifically, to just heal off a little bit of damage, and you generally don't want to do that. You want to either be saving your breather, right? Kind of like shield, you don't want to get depleted unless you really have to, right? Because even a little bit of breather still blocks 40% damage. And 2, you want to help your supports build ult charge. I think the only exception to that is if like you're really close to ult and you get just the last few percentage points. Yeah, that's an okay scenario. Your E ability, Pigpen. Pretty simple, really. I mean, just pull people through it. It does burst damage as people go over it, and then does damage over time should they stay in the shock field, right? See, it probably does about 200 damage-ish total, maybe 180. Really, the main important thing about it is you can't actually one-shot some DPS without it, like Reaper, importantly. You can get with it, but not without it. Right. And of course, the slowdown on tanks is very useful, especially stuff like Ball and Queen. It helps them stay in the field, easier follow-up shots is what I'm trying to say. One small thing about it, you'll see if you drive them straight over the center and they stop over it, they do a little bounce. That can be okay if you anticipate it right. People can't really move while they're in the air. So as long as you're anticipating it and like jump up or something and try to headshot them, they'll die no problem. Roadhog's ultimate as a whole hog, right? Does a lot of damage and a lot of knockback, right? And importantly, it does headshot, right? So you can use this to C9 people, enviro kill them, or you can just jam tanks in corners, right? And it will destroy them if you go for headshots very quickly. I think it does around 700-ish damage per second. So, but I imagine most people are interested in Roadhog because of his hook. So, you know, hook is a fairly generous ability. See, it still connects even from almost an entire body length off Tracer. You know, it's not the easiest thing to hit, but it is fairly forgiving still, so keep that in mind. The general rule for hook is cast the hook, walk back a little, walk forward as the hook's being reeled in, and then once the hook, I guess, ends and you can, actually shoot, immediately shoot, and then melee immediately. So, if you'll notice in the hook animation, sometimes a special animation will end where, like, I'll try to get it to happen here. I'm not exactly sure what's not happening. Anyways, right, you can see if you shoot melee, there's actually no delay between the two. You see that animation there? If you pull it off correctly, right? Yeah, you can't see the melee at the end. It doesn't matter on Tracer anyways. But the melee does, I think, 40-ish damage, and it's kind of critical, because otherwise you do 240 max, so. And obviously it goes without saying, pull people through trap like Reaper and stuff like that, and you can pull off one-shots on them. You can't do that without the trap. So, yeah, make sure you get that sequence down. You know, walking forward into the hook is very important. There's so many people that don't. You will not get max damage that way. You'll miss out on a lot of kills if you do not do that. If you take too long to walk forward, right, or if you take too long before you shoot, and you notice you can move fully, the enemy can move fully too, right? You have about a third of a second-ish, maybe a quarter, to walk forward and actually get your shot off before your enemy can input anything. And, you know, that makes all the difference. You either get stunned or they teleport away or something, and you miss out on a kill completely. Or they only take, you know, a certain percentage of the damage you could otherwise use to probably one-shot them. So, very important to get that timing down. That's probably easiest to do in-game, right? But you can pull that off probably against these practice spots down here. Before we move on to, I guess, the actual techs, I will note that a lot of tanks have a higher head height than Roadhog, right? So, if I just hook him in standard, I'm aiming at his torso. So ideally, you actually want to hook the tanks in, jump as the hook's ending, right? And then aim down to shoot their head. It doesn't matter for the first shot, generally speaking, but it gives you better follow-ups, right? Because if you're looking down, if your pellets miss the head, they'll still hit the body of your intended target, right? But if you look up, they'll fly off into the distance, right? So, in my opinion, this is the most important Roadhog tech. The turn tech, see, very useful. It brings people out of the LOS of their teammates, right? So, I'm not going to keep moving the bot down here because they move back. So you can imagine though, like if I hook this guy, bring him here, and this other bot's an Ana or you know, a Diva or a Zarya, and they're here, they're no longer in LOS, right? Now this guy has to swing all the way out here to be able to save him, right? And that's opposed to if I were just to hook him right here, they're still in LOS of their teammate, right? So it's very useful for that. Two, you know, imagine this guy is my teammate, right? If I hook someone and bring them in LOS, clear LOS of my team, you know, that gives them an easier shot. You know, in this example, it's not particularly important, but let's say I hook this Tracer, try to get her down here. I hook her here, you know, my teammate doesn't have very good LOS, especially because I'll be completely blocking the Tracer, right? But if I turn them to the left or right, then it's a much clearer shot, so. And if you notice, I do a slight flick to the left and then to the right. So I do it first, I move my camera to the opposite side and then to the correct side of the corner. It's hard to show that in slow motion, but what's happening, I think, is the hook target first goes to, you know, the opposite side of the corner. They get displaced from here to like here-ish, and then from here they get displaced over here. That helps you get around tighter corners, and personally, it also helps me get the timing correctly. So I'll show you what happens if you do not get the timing correctly. You turn too early, they'll get stuck on whatever's in between you and where you want to drag them, right? So the correct timing to do is first wait for the hook to connect, And then as it's reeling back, similarly to how I said you need to start walking forward as the hook's reeling back, and this is thing you have to get the timing for, then you do the turns, right? And this is fundamentally the same for every sort of hook tech. So I'm about to go over jumps and slingshots. So excuse that. So this is another important tech. You know, it's very useful on maps like Gibraltar or Blizzard World, right? If you hook someone, jump as they're being reeled in, and aim up, they'll get actually brought to the same elevation as you. It's dependent on the elevation difference and how far they away from you horizontally. If they're right below you, there's no way to do it. And if the elevation difference is too high, they won't be able to get pulled up. But you see, same concept, right? I hit the hook, wait for it to start getting reeled in. I'm gonna and then jump as he's coming up. I guess you actually see, it's much smoother. That's what you want there. I actually tried to mess it up the first time and got distracted because I was talking. But if you mess the timing up, they'll get stuck here, right? They'll get stuck on the ledge and just drop down. Actually didn't correct. So I'm not going to sit around and just wait to mess up. Unfortunately, it gets hard to mess up after a certain point. So, anyways, just practice that a bit there. Get consistent with bringing them up to high ground, and again, very useful in certain maps, or to get them over ledges, right? So sometimes they'll get caught on barriers like this if you just do a simple turn or jump at the wrong time. But if you jump as they're getting reeled in, they'll have no problem clearing the barrier, right? So one of the interesting things about hook, very far range, right? It gets people off guard. It does go 20 meters. Another interesting thing is it will not break should you keep walking back further than 20 meters, right? So sometimes if you get booped, your hook will not break, right? As you can see there. No problem keeping it going. You can pull off some crazy long hooks sometimes should the following two things not happen, right? First, if less than 50% of your target is visible when the hook starts getting reeled in, it'll break. You can see there I landed the hook technically, but since I kept moving to the right, less breaking LOS, you know, the hook breaks. Obviously in game, your opponents would keep walking, not you. Ideally you do something like that if that were the case, right? Or two, obviously if you get stunned or sucked out of it or something along those lines, right? Yeah, so I guess the final tech here, slingshot. Again, same concept. Wait for the hook to start reeling in, and then hit your ult. You'll cancel your hook, but your opponents will preserve their momentum, right? So as you can see, you can get environs with that. You can, you know, sling people behind you. Obviously here, you know, there's no map like that. Just imagine there's a giant pit here, no problem dying. Alternatively, you can also do that to send people to your team. So again, imagine the team's behind. It's not a very good one. I'm not very good at it. If you wait to cancel it too late, momentum, you know, isn't the same here almost at the end of the hook as it is during the middle of it. So something to keep in mind. You ideally want to cancel it in the middle so you get that full momentum transfer. But if you get, you know, really good with the timing, you can do exactly what you want. Like maybe you only want to do that short pull. So keep that in mind. It's very situational. I rarely do it personally. You know, there are a few maps, like sometimes you can get away with it on like Colosseum or something. You know, if people overchase you in that big open area, or like Ilios, it works sometimes. It's worth playing around with. Definitely not as important as the turn tech. By far the most important thing. I'd get that down 100%. And then the jump hook's also very important, right? And that's situational. No reason not to learn it. Definitely helps. There are a few more techs. You usually have to mess with your DPI. You can like do something like that, and that actually causes your opponent to get caught in the hook animation longer than if you were just to turn this one side or another. Unfortunately, I don't have an easy way of changing my DPI, and you know, it helps sometimes stalling stuff out, like if they're nanoed or something. You know, you can get away with that sometimes, but it's even more situational than the slingshot. You know, it helps to know, you can do it, but I don't think I ever use it myself. So